Hello, wherever you are and whatever time of day it is. I'm excited to be here with you. And this podcast is hosted by me, Daniel Catone. I'm the CEO of Arimathea, and this is for Treasures in Heaven. And I have a really awesome guest today. I think you're all going to like him. We're going to get a little heavy today. I think we're going to cover some interesting topics, as you'll see. But my guest today is Ron Dodson. And he's a Dallas-based writer. He writes for American Reformer, but he's also the CEO and a portfolio manager with Dallas North Capital Partners. His work sits at the intersection of theology, culture, and power, informed not just by theory, but also hands-on experience, which I think is going to be very useful for us today, especially in these crazy markets that we're dealing with. But he focuses on questions of authority, order, and the limits of modern liberal assumptions, offering a perspective that is both grounded and deliberately challenging. And I will say, funny thing, we were joking about this before we got started here. He's my first Protestant guest on my show. So I want to say, Ron, I'm very excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. And I want you to write every time I go speak anywhere. I want you to come introduce me. That sounded better than I remember. I'm like, who's he talking about?
I
No,
wish I
that's
could
great.
take credit for all of that, but I use AI to help me write things, so I won't take full responsibility. But it's cool to have you here. You know, I've read your articles. You know, I've looked you up a little bit, and I'm just uniquely excited to dive into some topics today that are affecting everybody's life. But before we get into maybe the nitty gritty of foreign policy and investing and the Iran situation and all of that, can you just tell us a little bit about the work that you do for Dallas North Capital Partners?
Well, I've been in the alternative space since I got out of grad school way back in the 90s. So I went to work for I say little, about $1 billion hedge fund in 94 out of grad school in Dallas, and mainly a derivative, or the capital partner I worked for, we were all derivatives, and really learned. We were trying to be like a miniature Renaissance capital,
Huge firm.
Simon's deal. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I learned to code on an HP Apollo mini computer running I'm kind of a stat nerd, running back tests all night. And so that's kind of my background as far as that. But I've also always written. I wrote in high school. I wrote in college. I wrote in grad school. But when I got married and had kids, I continued to write for a closed group, but didn't write publicly because if you're going to be honest and you're going to be writing about important things, and money and faith are important things, then there's a good chance you're going to make somebody mad, even if your intention is not to make somebody mad. And I didn't want that coming down. It's the reason I never ran for public office, even though I was asked. I didn't want that coming back on my family. So now that both kids are out of the house, I've got one that's about ready to graduate from college, and another who's a sophomore. I started writing again about 3 years ago for the public, but I've always been involved, in the alternative space, either as lead portfolio manager, partner, or in the case now, owner. And I have a family office that I run that's called Dalcor Legacy. And then I run this outward-facing piece, which is Dallas North Capital Partners. Mostly, we have a quant piece that selects stocks. And then my background is mostly in stat arb in the volatility space. So volatility risk premium harvesting, for those nerds out there who follow that, you'll know what I'm talking about. For the rest of you, I won't explain it so that you would, to keep you from falling asleep there. If you're listening to this in your car, it would be very dangerous.
Okay.
It's a great strategy, but it's probably pretty boring for most.
Well, so you're not only my most Protestant guest, but you're also my nerdiest guest that I've had.
Oh, well,
It's a high compliment.
Yeah, I took a handful of Tylenol before showing up. So,
well, you're in good company. I'll say, you mentioned working in alternative investments, and I think just in terms of ground, simple definitional concepts, alternative investments, if I'm not mistaken, are any investments really other than stocks and bonds, but there's way more of them. I don't know why we call them alternatives.
Well, it's just an alternative in the sense that
Yeah.
normally what you're trying to do is get away from the 1940 Banking Act,
Mm,
which FDR, 39 and 40 acts. But the idea was that you needed to bifurcate because of the impact of the stock market crash and a lot of private investments that were that were very charlatan in
right.
origination. The New Deal banking environment was to bifurcate the investment populace from basically the average investor, the average person who might have the opportunity to own stocks and bonds, and then what's called a sophisticated or accredited investor, and
Mhm.
they're eligible to invest in these alternatives, which are private placement, private partnership investment vehicles. And it's just, you're able to take a lot more risk, even though my personal strategy has a high R squared, low volatility. It's mostly alpha, non-correlated kind of deal. The idea is that if it's a private investment, the position since 1940 was
Mhm.
that we're going to only allow a certain amount of the populace to participate in that. And there's arguments for and against that, but that's what alternatives are, really, that ability to invest in a non-public
Mhm.
instrument.
Okay. That's helpful, just for helping everybody understand kind of some things that we're going
Right.
to be talking about today. And um, yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. You mentioned FDR. So now I know you could have run for political office. And so I'm going to force you thumbs up or thumbs down. FDR presidency, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Well, let me be let me be political for a second
Please.
and say that FDR was a great man in the true sense of the word. Defined, really changed the definition of what America was, much like Lincoln did, for better or worse,
Mhm.
much like LBJ did with the Civil Rights Administration, where now we have basically an added layer upon our Constitution. Um, if we think of American epochs, you have Washington through well, you have the original Articles of Confederation
Mhm.
era, which was federalism to the max, but beyond that, which a growing continental nation could withstand,
Yeah.
possibly.
Didn't work great.
Uh, we could get it. That's worth its own podcast, honestly.
That was like
And
America
then
Part One.
that's America Part One, and really, you had a legal coup
Yeah.
uh, end that regime. And you had then the Constitution, the constitutional era, started by Washington, and Washington was very much this is part of American history that gets a short shake in our elementary school understanding, our felt board, because our beef with England wasn't a monarchy per se. It
Mhm.
was the fact that George he abdicated his responsibilities to the colonies, and we
Mhm.
sought protection going forward from having a chief executive do the same.
Mhm.
So it's not that we disagreed with having a very powerful chief executive. I mean, full Article 2 powers are comprehensive.
Yes.
And Washington very easily could have stepped into an eternal king role. He was of the nobility
Mm.
in his family.
Mhm.
But what we wanted to do, and Madison's idea was, or this is early Madison. Madison kind of drifted as he got older and under the influence of his friend Jefferson, who was much more radical.
Mhm.
But the idea was we were going to have this mixed regime, which is actually kind of an old idea.
Mm.
It was a development upon, this kind of Athens, Jerusalem idea. There's for those of you folks who watch my other podcast, there's your Straussian. If you're playing the Ron Dodson drinking game, there you go. Mixed regime is on is on your bingo board. But the idea was, how can we have a chief executive who has this power but is accountable? So it's the one office that everybody votes for, the only one in the entire nation, and but the only remedy against executive action is impeachment. Now, but since Lincoln, and then since FDR, and then since, well, you could say Wilson, and then FDR, and then certainly since LBJ, you've had various encroachments upon that executive power, and that's really where a lot of these tensions. You saw it today. If any of you watched the day we're filming, you had the arguments in the citizenship case. You saw these tensions coming to bear, I think. Anyway, I don't know if you wanted that long an answer.
No, it's interesting. So you would say FDR, mixed bag, but you seem to respect him as a great historical figure. But
I respect the fact that he was a great historical figure who did something was going to happen at that point in history. I would argue that a more federalist, a recovery of some of the federalism that was maybe by necessity lost under Lincoln would have been a better long-term solution to conserve what America was.
Interesting.
So in that way, I have profound and emotional disagreements with FDR.
Of course.
I think FDR was absolutely enamored with socialism. And I don't say that as just a political jab. I think he had a lot of fellow travelers with the Soviets in his deal. The Soviet Union was kind of his pet project. Without Lend-Lease, the Soviet Union collapses. We ally with the Soviets. Look, I'm no fascist, and I don't even think fascism exists anymore. I'm with Paul Gottfried.
But you weren't at the No Kings protest this weekend?
Oh, good. Don't get me going. Okay, don't put me offside. That was a good hard count, but no, I was not. But anyway, I think FDR was very much enamored with this idea that there was a new, what became managerialism. This new way of doing things that was kind of not a radical communism as Marx tried to foresee, but just this very much a cosmopolitan collectivism that lends itself to what I call kind of a neo-Talmudism, that we're just going to managerialize. We're going to have an answer for every problem rather than having the rule of wise men. And I think the New Covenant calls for the rule of wise men under that and wisdom is bound under the knowledge of good and evil. That's what one of the main themes of our Christian Bible is about, is this maturation to pursue the knowledge of good and evil and have that not condemn us, but mature us towards Christ-likeness.
Yeah.
And that's a true political Christendom, and I think truly Catholic Western political theology, but I think it's been lost. And we had really, if you want to get real weird about it, we fought 2 world wars to destroy that. And so in that way, I'm very contra FDR, while respecting the greatness of his persona, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the only mechanism that we have for preventing basically authoritarian rule is impeachment. And
the only remedy.
I would stretch that a little bit. And I would say that the civil rights movement and the current movement in China of people just opting out of society is also a functional remedy for authoritarian power, which actually worked in the 1960s. And so I would argue that really the democratization of power, which the American nation has brought in full fruit, I think, is an equal remedy to the impeachment process, and perhaps even more successful historically.
It in in practical ways, absolutely. I was
Mhm.
just speaking
Constitution.
within the formal
Yeah,
power structure of a written
yeah.
constitution. The
That makes
remedy is,
that makes
yeah,
perfect sense. And you're a deacon in the Presbyterian Church of America, correct?
I am.
Yeah,
Yes, just right up the road here, Park Cities Presbyterian Church in
cool.
Dallas, Texas.
Well, I mention it because, when you're talking about this, Catholicity of a polity, that
Hmm.
the political system in which we all engage, has roots in, Christendom, and that's, I think, undeniable. I think there's we can quibble on some details.
Hmm.
And then your comment about the rise of sort of the radical version, radical communism, Marx in the late 1800s, is interesting as well because I think both subjects, the Christianization or the Catholicization of government and economics, as well as the best critique that we have in the 1800s of socialism and communism, is Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo's wonderful encyclical, which I don't know if my Presbyterian friends could borrow it, but I think it is a really nicely done document.
My familiarity with that is hair, just a hair breadth of depth. So although I'll tell you where I'm coming from on that. I
Yeah,
thought I was a big fan of Benedict and what
yeah.
he wrote on these things, not as direct as that document, but I thought he was moving towards a reasonable and inclusive political, and I say inclusive in the sense of the churches worldwide, political theology that was, I think, in his heart, felt very much a pang of wanting the church to be united, at least in some
Mhm,
shape, form, or fashion.
mhm.
Uh, and, and that's really most of the reading I've done in
Okay.
Catholic
Yeah,
political theology
sure.
that is in any way modern.
Yeah.
I've read,
Aquinas and, classics. Yeah.
well, Aquinas and Augustine
Mhm.
and Chrysostom and so on and so forth. But
Wow, that's cool.
yeah,
St. John Chrysostom, he wrote my liturgy that I attend, Byzantine liturgy, which is pretty
it's
cool.
absolutely incredible,
Yeah.
the sermons that he
One of the
gave.
greatest men to have ever lived, I would argue, and I think,
Yeah,
his my favorite line, and this kind of runs afoul of our discussion from St. John Chrysostom is, "If a man owns 2 coats, he has stolen one from the poor."
yeah, he was.
That hits you
No,
pretty hard.
my buddy Charles Haywood has written
Yeah.
a lot and commented a lot on. He's at the Worthy House,
Mhm.
great site, great guy, um, and Chrysostom, especially uh, in that era of great change.
Mhm.
So in the period of, you're talking 70, 75 years
Mhm.
after Constantine has his vision, there and we could tell this has to do with markets, with politics, with
Mhm.
theology. Anytime there's great volatility, it's the reason we want peace and order, not chaos,
Mhm.
is the cost of that is disproportionately borne by the poor.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Chrysostom was in an era where, not like the poor we have with us today who have
Sure.
a cell phone and TV in every room,
Mhm.
but literally couldn't clothe themselves.
Like
And
Calcutta level poverty.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. And so, what a great man.
Hmm.
What a great man. And I think that heart for what it really boils down to, and when I read or listen recited, I'll do the whole I'll create a file and then have it read and I'll listen to it in the car, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's awesome because faith
Mhm.
comes by hearing and
That's
hearing
true.
about
That's right. Paul
but
told us that.
so that the it calls it's that whole ordo amoris, where your love for your fellow man that you come into contact with. It's very much who
Mhm.
is your neighbor. It's who does God place in your path
And that's really
that
Aquinas. I mean, that's his concept.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, it's just Bible.
Yeah.
And Aquinas was recovering
Mhm.
a lot. You know, I don't need to
Yeah.
tell you that, but
Yeah.
that idea that you have, it's why citizenship is so important
Mhm.
at some level. It's why subsidiarity and federalism are kind of one from the top down, one from the bottom up of this
Mhm.
idea of localism, where you are bound to those whom you are around, is covenantally is uh is hugely important. And Chrysostom, that's kind of the why behind the what of what's
Yeah.
going on, at least in my reading.
And he hits you right in the gut. I mean, some of these things that he says, it should cause you to reexamine your priors and your assumptions and the way in which you live your life.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
and so this is interesting. I mean, I'm going to have to send you a copy to Rem Novarum, like a nice bound one. It's my favorite.
Okay.
It's my favorite encyclical, perhaps. But what I think we can start with is a statement, perhaps, or maybe it's a question. I'm going to say, and that is, what is the grounding principle of economics? Like, what is the most core idea in economics? And I would argue, and I think the church has argued this, that the foundation of economics is rooted in human dignity, in man's relationship to God and our relationship to our brothers and sisters. And so that becomes the foundational principle upon which you can build the virtues and everything else necessary to make a functional economic system. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I think the economics functions in, and this is going to be kind of, this is going to sound way Protestanty. Um, it
We're
functions in
expanding our audience, I think, with this
it,
interview. This is very important.
it's it's going to function in two spheres.
Mhm.
There is there is absolutely the liturgical or theological economy that is within the Bible, that is exactly what you're speaking of. And that's the foundation.
Mhm.
From a and that's prescriptive. The
Mhm.
descriptive, or let's call it the hard science side of economics, is that how does it work, and is all based upon two things: the 10th commandment, which establishes, if there is stuff for me to covet that doesn't belong to me but belongs to him, that means that there is private property. That property in and of itself, and I know this was a huge, in the 1200s, maybe
Mm.
this was a huge, the Dominicans,
Yep.
was it the Dominicans,
Yes.
had a huge, the absolute poverty of Christ, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That being said, the 10th commandment does take for granted that there is stuff that is not mine but belongs to somebody else,
Mhm.
and that the the you see a transaction that is even modeled in the sacrificial cultus of
Mhm.
what I call the double thank you. So that whether I receive, if I give you a goat and you give me some corn, we are both blessed by
Mhm.
that transaction. It is not it is not compelled by force. It is compelled by blessing.
Mhm.
And so that is modeled even in the sacrificial system by the fact, well, in multiple ways. The sacrifice rose up to God and made him happy in the form of the smoke, and the priests, and in the form of the free will offering, the priests and the one who offered the sacrifice were able to enjoy the rest of that, the non best parts, so to speak.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Hmm.
so there is a sense in which you have the theological underpinning that is that is mystical and theological and is vertical, and that is reflected by this horizontal double thank you that has dirt under its fingernails, so to speak. And so when I go, about this morning, when I stopped at the gas station and got my gum, Icebreakers ice cubes, this is what I like, and I I hit my little card, and they got their, I don't even know how much this is, honest, $2 or something. They were thankful to have that, and I was thankful to have this. Both were made happy. And that's ultimately reflective of worship. That
That's
is
interesting.
That's
it's interesting
faithfulness.
perspective. This is a very interesting perspective. I would say it's absolutely not contradictory with the Catholic perspective, and I think it's just almost a different facet of the diamond that you're looking at. And I would
Sure.
maybe I would even say that all economic theory and activity is relational. And so then we could say that our behavior within economic choices that we're making is incarnational, in that we're incarnating, making real, making meat, those principles by which you just helped us with. And so the mutual benefit of a transaction between two parties, if both parties refuse to engage in economics, they would not have that shared joy.
That's right.
Now, then I think it begs a question, or it should beg a question, or perhaps, and that is, if both economic participants have a shared joy through an appropriate and right exchange of goods and services and monetary value, it still is foundationed. Its foundation is still rooted in human dignity, or what a man is. And so, to your point, I would say that where you look at Marx, Adam Smith, any of these great economic thinkers from post-Enlightenment, I would say, they all reduce man to something other than child of God.
Well, what they do is, here's the trick they play.
Yeah.
And this is the great lie. What they do is they make man fungible.
Yes.
And man is not fungible.
Yes. Yeah. Man
That's
is a
what
worker.
You can't do.
Right.
Yeah, he's just another, he's a plug in an equation, and each one, you are no different from me, who is not. It's the ultimate, it's the lie that is implicit in all forms of all forms of liberalism. And I don't mean Democrat versus Republican. I mean liberalism is in the sense of you are liberated from your station, so to speak, that is determined by the boundaries of your habitation, to quote St. Paul in Acts 17, who is just so anyway. Yeah. And then you mentioned it's incarnational. It absolutely is. And even deeper, I think it's perichoretic. So there's this doctrine of perichoresis that describes the interrelation of the Trinity. Perichoresis was a very old doctrine. It's been lost in a lot of the Protestant and Reformed churches, as they have really overemphasized a divine simplicity. And I don't mean to go against, but almost a monadic view of the Godhead, as opposed to co-equal persons who exist in a covenantal, loving, eternal relationship.
Yeah.
And so perichoresis is just a fancy way of saying, it's Greek for around the circle. I believe is the rough translation of that. And so, economics reflects that the economy of the Godhead, so to speak. And absolutely does the God, look at the way the Godhead treats itself as revealed in Scripture. When Jesus is transfigured on the mount, listen to him. That's the Father saying, listen to him. You have all three persons of the Trinity present at Christ's baptism, and in him I am well pleased. Jesus says, you will do the will of my Father. You listen to him. I will send my helper, the Spirit, who will be this counselor for you, who will give you words. Listen to him. And so there's this economy within the Godhead, this perichoresis that is that is always pointing to the dignity of the other, rather than is there a point in which the persons of the Trinity each receive worship? Absolutely. You see that most reflected when Jesus receives the anointing of his feet. And when I was a kid, that always bothered me. Well, where's, as this little Southern Baptist kid, I had to accept John Calvin into my heart later on. That's a joke.
Get into that too.
That's a joke, people. That is a joke. Look, anyway, we can't get into that. I was just making a joke.
I want to stop you for a second, because I'm gonna ask you a question. Doug Wilson up in Idaho.
Yeah, I know Doug.
Yeah. I think that, the Christian nationalism movement, which I would argue Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth perhaps is biased towards, I wouldn't say he's like a member or something like that, is interesting. I would like to talk about that today. But specifically this concept that you're talking about Trinitarian relationship, and where I have seen Mr. Wilson, I think, run into a ditch, frankly, is the subordination of the Father or the Son to the Father, where you can actually have a significant Trinitarian error, which can rise out of the subordination argument. And I know you're not making that argument.
I'm not.
But I think it's something that people should be aware of to listen for. And I think they relate it back to the way men and women relate to each other in the marriage. And then they transpose that largely onto the Trinity.
Yeah, and I think that's problematic. Because that's ontologically different.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. One is analogous to the other. They're not.
Yeah, and is there at times, for our benefit, the appearance of a functional hierarchy? You can make that argument. But as for this idea of eternal subordination, I think that's not perichoretic. That's more of a ladder. And I just don't think the Bible speaks that way.
So you do not subscribe to that theology.
The early tradition of the church is not that. So no, I mean, and I love Doug. I've known Doug for a long time, and we get along. He makes me scratch my head sometimes.
I'd love to have him on my show.
What's that?
I want to have him on my show.
Oh, he would do, he's got a degree in philosophy, so he can speak very cogently about a lot of things. I think that if you peer too deeply into some of these things, I'm going to start sounding like a ortho bro here.
Yeah, we got
some of this is pretty
man. It's just a mystery.
There is mystery, and you just have to, look, the Son reveals the Father. No one has seen the Father who dwells in unapproachable light. And we just have to say, okay, all right. Some of this stuff maybe in I guess we'll find out in the great resurrection. But even then, I don't know. The Bible makes no promises on this.
That's a great answer. I don't know either.
Yeah.
But
I am uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable with the eternal subordination deal. I'm less uncomfortable with trying to describe things. The problem is you start describing Trinitarian relationships, you get either into modalism or monadism. You just, it's pretty mysterious. Just kind of stick with what the Father said and how the Bible reveals it, and just kind of leave it there. That's and I love explaining everything. I'll talk about anything, but I think you're kind of walking on coals when you go there.
I think, Ron, if you have a new idea in theology, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yes. What we are called to do is help recover some of the stuff maybe that is lost.
Sure.
I think that's my only, I'll say this to you guys. You've got, I would assume, mostly a Catholic listening audience.
Protestants, close your ears.
I will say this. Well, No, I want Protestants to hear this,
Yes.
that I think the only valid purpose for any type of Protestant reforming movement at all is to be a prophetic voice of recovery to the whole of the church. If you're just trying to go do your own thing and have a me and my Bible Christianity that is coming up with new stuff, you've lost the plot. And and a recovery of the prophetic role of the church, prophetic in the sense of speaking authority to speaking authoritarily to the earthly authorities and keeping ourselves all accountable. I mean, originally the only real purpose of, and I'm talking about the continental reformers, Calvin, Bootser, those guys it was purely a magisterial thing, not a let the individual bishops argue over soteriological and these other matters. Let's and not so much now. It's kind of a free for all, and that bothers me as much as it bothers you. Trust me.
I hear you, man. Would you agree that much of that free fall for all is the fruit or the seed of the Reformation?
The fruit, yes. Again,
Actually, I mean seed.
when
I mean a seed from the
yeah.
fruit is what I mean.
So the original, when you had the period of the three popes and some of the, all churches go through. We're a body of Christ, and there are times where we get sick. There's times where things don't go as well. We have cancers that have to be cut out. All these, it's a body, and expecting perfection. I think as it grew, as the Reformation went 2 and 3 and 4 generations in and I am going to get in trouble with my
Hey, man, we're just here to
reform
tell the
folks.
truth.
Well, what I mean is the reform. I'm not a huge fan of the reform scholastic movement that just kind of went very smart people trying to do good things, but it just got very managerialistic. It became almost its own holiness spiral. I'm not, for instance, I hold to a Catholic ecclesiology, not a Puritan ecclesiology. It's why I'm not an elder. I'm just a deacon. In my particular church structure, we're a 3-office body, and so. But all that being said, the whole the regardless, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, that prophetic office needs to be recovered. Because how else is the state? If we're a three-legged stool, if God created 3 institutions, if God instituted 3 organizations in order to uphold his ongoing project of creation, of growing his civilization to reflect on earth as it is in heaven, of the church, the family, and the state, then the state, how can the state do what it's called to do, which is to protect order by bearing the sword? How is it going to do that without the prophetic role of the church telling it what good and evil is? It can't. And without the family raising up godly progeny, it can't. So regardless of where you are in the 3 major branches of the church, that is critical. And that prophetic role is huge. And
You're a
so
branch theory guy.
what's that?
You're a branch theory guy. You're
No, I just use that because I figure people will know.
No, that's fair.
I'm just using that for the sake of verbal shorthand, so to speak.
I was just giving you a hard time. So, I want to distill things down. I mean, you and I we can spend all our time in these clouds. I'd be happy to, but most of my listeners would not be. In all seriousness, I think these ideas that you're sharing with us are where the practicality comes from, right? So the ideas, the theories, the theology is the ground, and the practicality is the seeds and the fruit that comes out of that ground. And so I think you're wise to have all this foundational work done. And so I guess my question to you is, as a portfolio manager, someone who works with money on a daily basis, how do you deal with this critique? I don't know if you know my friends over at New Polity. Have you ever heard
I
of New
don't.
Polity? Okay, I should introduce you. Really smart gentleman over there. Um, I had Mark Barnes, who's one of the founders of New Polity, on my show. They make the argument that it is immoral to invest in publicly traded equities. That's their position. It is immoral, and they actually derive that position, I think, largely from a misunderstanding. They would not say that, of Aquinas, and then they would point to biblical passages that also seem to be pointing us away from investing. Mhm.
Are they making a distributist argument?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I would certainly
Yeah.
put them in the distributist camp.
Yeah, that's
but
because that sounds like my buddy Dave Green.
okay.
Yeah.
So
I
is
don't
it
know if you know
immoral?
Dave.
Mm-mm.
Dave, the distributist.
Mm.
Oh, gosh, as I lean back. Let me say this. I made the argument on another pod late last year that I think that corporate personhood is probably immoral.
Okay.
And that if you're going to have corporate personhood, it has to have the obligations and duties of citizenship. Because God has ordained the state. It is not through just an amorphous morality that governs human events. It is God has delegated this authority to of promoting good and punishing evil through the state. Imperfect as it is, we live in a sinful world. Get that. So I think that corporate personhood must be tied to citizenship, and I'm skeptical of any claim to profits that do not tie to risk or liability.
Okay.
So the modern share, which is share of ownership, that's how you buy stocks and everything. You're buying a share. You are not held liable to the actions of this company. Your entire liability is just whatever you paid for that share.
You mean legal liability?
Legal liability. Well,
I
you
would say
can't
not
be
moral.
No. We're talking again. I'm a little bit of I'm with my buddy Curtis Yarvin on this. I'm making a formalist argument.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So on a formalist basis, you're not liable. That's a problem because we all know you're morally liable, right? So it's the job of this is the prophetic role of the church, but the church doesn't, the Protestant churches sure don't. I don't know if there's, maybe the church has spoken recently on this.
On corporate personhood specifically?
Well, just on the idea that corporate action extends liability to ownership. So,
I'll tell you this flat out: the church has definitively stated that every economic decision is a moral decision.
Yeah, but okay, and that's great, and that's true. I applaud that. But in order for it to have any weight, it's got to be specific. Okay, especially in America, you've got to tell people exactly, here's the pie in the sky idea. Yeah, I believe in a Article 2 executive.
Yep.
Okay, great, Ron. What does that mean?
Yep.
That means I think that everyone in the executive branch serves at the pleasure of the president, and that means he can fire anybody at any time. Oh, okay, that's specific. Sure. Okay. You either agree with that or not.
I will tell you, Ron, we do actually have a couple documents. I don't know if you've seen them. But the
Probably
2000, well, I think you'd really like these. The 2021 United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Socially Responsible Investment Guidelines are the guidelines which the church is binding herself to. It's not prescriptive for us as laity, but it's. Have you seen this document?
No.
Okay. Oh, that's not. I'm going to send you this one too. So you get Rerum Novarum and you get USCCB document. And then the other one is Mensarum Bonum, good measure in Latin, which the Vatican released a year.
5 years Latin here.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Negative
Protestant.
5 years. I don't know nothing about Latin. My English is questionable, but the Mensarum Bonum out of the Vatican also is a really specific document. I mean, it gets down to the granularity of, if more than 5% of the revenue of the company is derived from X, you may not invest.
Yeah.
So that type of specificity might be what you're
And
looking
how
for.
many Catholics do you think follow that?
Well, there's one, Arimathea. We do, and we're trying to get the idea out there. We want everybody to.
I mean, my argument, and again, I don't say this to be a provocative at all. I think that it's encouraging to me. I think the boots on the ground. So my kids both went to a Catholic high school. So
Awesome.
I've been to many, many masses. I'm not your average Presbyterian. Okay. So my nephew went to anyway, we can get to a school where the professors were all monks. So, but the point is that the authority of the church and the churches is, like it or not, and I don't like, in the Protestant world, I don't like it, but it's becoming very, very federalized and that's just reality.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, whether you're Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox, you're going to pass 5 churches, or at least in the South, you're going to pass 5 churches until the one you get to that you chose as a consumer decision. So, like it or not, we have a federal, and we've got to deal with that rule. So, I love Council of Bishops. Can we get some? I would love to see the Council of Bishops and my particular time. I mean, we're 3. We don't have that many members. The PCA is a large Presbyterian denomination, but that's not saying much. We Presbyterians, we're tiny.
Yeah.
But I would love
a few million, maybe 2 million people.
3 million.
3 million. Okay.
So I think, and that's all Presbyterians together.
Yeah.
So my church is 5,000 people, but it's one of the 3 largest Presbyterian PCA churches in the nation.
Got it.
But and I'm not saying that's good or bad that it's that large. I mean, big churches have a lot of opportunities to serve. They also have, a lot of cracks you can fall through.
Yeah.
Anyway, point being is that this is a great opportunity for dialogue. I would love, I mean, one of the reasons I sent my kids to Catholic schools, I wanted them in that environment. I wanted them to understand the historic Western church. I wanted them to listen to priests in that tradition. And when the bishop came and talked, go receive a blessing. Couldn't receive communion, but hold your arms up and receive the blessing. That historic part, we are part of that Western tradition. I think we're very much part of that. We're,
undeniably.
So that was important for me, for my kids to participate in and to have an appreciation for, and when they received unbiblical teaching in school by the professors, to call it out and say, hey, this is against your own doctrine. And eventually they got asked, my younger one, who's a little bit of a pistol, got asked to just quietly hush it.
It's always the youngest one. My youngest is Lily, and she is a firecracker.
Yeah. Well, mine, she was a college soccer player, and anyway.
Cool. Well, actually, you make an interesting point. I want to kind of suss this out a little bit. So, on the Catholic side, we're able to say, literally at the pain of the commission of sin, the church can say to the laity, you are bound to, they could say this, not invest in X way.
Yeah.
And we would be held to that, just like no meat on Fridays, kind of seriousness for us. And I think it's a theological distinction between, and I'm talking like magisterial Protestantism, and I guess it would flow to everybody, and Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And this theological distinction is this question of binding the laity's soul to these questions. And I think it's harder to do for you guys.
Well, big part of, I think that there was a natural reaction both on the continent and in the UK against sometimes the abuses that can come from binding the conscience.
Yes.
And so there was a reactionary force against that kind of went, admittedly, I think, too far the other way, but was understandable. In other words, where does I would love to see, Calvin believed in the continuation of the confessional, of not the corporate confessional, which we do participate in, but also the private confessional. And I think that's a perfect place in a perfect world for the binding of this is wrong, you're in sin, don't continue this.
Because of the authority of the individual conscience.
That exactly, and it's done in a individual ministerial, I know this situation, and we've lost this. And again, the proto-reformers and Calvin wanted this to stay, that this was the appropriate way to bind the conscience.
Interesting. And I think actually, I mean, the good news is that's exactly where the church is right now on investing. And that it is, and what we say at Arimathea is we help everyone every Catholic in America invest without compromise of conscience, because as Aquinas teaches, your conscience is the final arbiter of truth. And if it's well formed, you're going to be leaning into the truth over and over again as you grow in holiness. But an
unformed kind of Kantian,
a little Kantian. I'll get me started on that guy. We could do 2 hours on how much I hate Kant. But
thank you. I'm here for it. When are you having me back?
We'll have you back, and we'll do a whole thing on Kant. But anyways, I think that the state.
What about Hegel?
The worst. Although I will say, this is a talkative diversion. All my listeners can laugh at us.
The worst in an insightful way, and that's what's so frustrating.
Well, I'd say Nietzsche is the worst in an insightful way. I would say I'm with McIntyre. That there are only two honest philosophers, and that's Aristotle and Nietzsche. And so
you're gonna do my boy Plato?
I also love Plato, but I would say that. And this is not McIntyre. He didn't say this specifically, although he's a convert. He might have been Presbyterian. I could be mistaken, but McIntyre argued that Aristotle, honest philosopher, everything means everything. Everything has meaning. And then you have Nietzsche, who's basically the opposite. He says nothing has any meaning.
Of course.
And everybody Hegel and everybody's in the middle.
Which is why existentialism ends up in nihilism, which ends up with sucking on the barrel of a shotgun.
Yep. Exactly. So what I was getting at is one of the cool things about Catholicism is that we do have right now, current event is really clear guidance on the way in which we should be investing our money, grounded in these principles of human dignity, promotion of the common good, the centrality of the family in the social system, the avoidance of all the isms like communism and capitalism and all the other isms, frankly, where the only ism that we accept is Catholicism. But we have this really nicely built, and I would argue lay-led movement of these ideas. At the same time, the church has not become so specific and prescriptive to bind us corporately to these documents. And it is to your point, when I go into the confessional as a professional asset manager with a master's in theology, the consequences for my soul of buying a bad stock or an index fund that is not screened for Catholic social teaching is far more severe because of the weight of knowledge that I have, that maybe, some nice dentist somewhere who's starting to invest for the first time, they go to the confessional and say they're not going to confess it anyways, but they have an index fund. I think the weight on their soul is much, much different than mine, which might be much more severe.
See, I would, and I think we've lost, and this cycles throughout civilizational history, especially in the West, but we've lost some of the macro vision of justice in some of this. And by that, I mean not just caring for the poor, but what's the very basis of our transactional reality?
Common good.
So, for instance, financial repression. or the idea that I'm going to hold rates lower than they would be in that double thank you transactional environment in order to create a transfer payment from savers and poor people to my elite investing class is immoral as all hell, pardon me.
Yes.
But it
No,
is
you're right.
awful and it is wrong. But these concepts are beyond the training of most
Yes.
your parish priests, certainly, but probably most bishops and everything. So this
Yes.
so sometimes we as just good old private pew sitters need to stand up and exert a little prophetic. Remember, the prophets generally weren't priests.
Right.
These were people God just raised up out of conviction and inspiration to either whisper in the ear of the king or lay down their life.
Yes. And that's the power of the laity. I mean, this is Vatican II.
That's right.
You're speaking the Vatican II language, of the lay-led.
Absolutely.
The real truth of Vatican II. I'm not talking like the spirit, all that kind of nonsense from the 70s, but felt banner Catholicism and all that. I'm out on anything involving those. But although that's the church that I went to when I was growing up, every Easter we'd go once a year, kind of thing, twice a year, maybe now. I think we went more than that. But
I want to stop you. It's funny because one of my dear friends who I was my dad left my mom when I was 6. So divorce was final when I was 7, and we were Creasters, Christmas and Easter Christians. But my grandparents were very, very faithful, and so I went to church with them. But I didn't become close friends with any Catholics until I was later in life in college. And this one guy who was faithful, he went to mass every Sunday, and his parish priest was so faithful. And he, because the old saw is, well, Protestants know their Bible, but Catholics know their faith, or who the king is, so to speak. This guy knew his Bible frontwards and backwards. And so it was such a testimony to and wasn't preachy or weird or anything. He was just a guy who, and I said, man, I haven't known a lot of Catholics, but you have this. And he just went on and on about how great his priest really encouraged him. He had an aptitude and a love for this, I think, from an early age, and his parish priest really encouraged it. But it was really neat to see. So that's one of the reasons I have as a dirty Protestant, have such don't discount the witness that you have individually as just a guide when you have when you're relating to either a Protestant or Orthodox or atheist friend or whatever, because this guy had a huge impact on me. I was like, oh,
that's cool.
That's cool.
Wow. That's good. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I would say, each of us are called to this priest, prophet, and king role that, of course, was given to our Lord by his Father, and then is passed on to us through our adoption. And so, each of our, and I think maybe it was C.S. Lewis. I think I'm going to butcher this quote, but it was something along the lines of, "With every person you interact with, you're helping them walk to eternal glory or a monstrous hell."
Yeah,
and with each decision
that
we make,
path. Yeah. Are you helping shine the light on that path?
Yeah.
Well, that gets to the whole meaning. Priest in Hebrew is Kohen. That literally means house servant or butler. And so this is why Jesus calls the Pharisees blind guides. He's calling to that very office.
Interesting.
And he's saying, because the priesthood had become corrupted, there's through the Maccabean era, the Maccabees were neither Judah.
You guys got Maccabees?
I've written extensively on it, but that's another topic for another day. Anyway, there's this corruption that came because the high priest was not a Zadokite, and they also took the role of king, and they were not Judahite. So there was this big corruption that gave rise to the Pharisee party, which was claiming that the temple had become corrupt because of this, and that's really the milieu that Jesus comes into.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it also relates. The Pope is called the servant to the servants of God. You know, that's
Right.
the role of the priest, is to be the servant. And, you know, you made a really interesting point about the educational level on investing in theology and their relationship and economics of priests and religious and bishops. And from practical experience, I mean, I talk to these folks every day of my life. Um, the level of knowledge is astoundingly low in these subjects for the whole American populace.
Mhm.
And specifically, I think folks that lean into religion as their entire path for life, their
Mhm.
vocation. You know, I say, generally speaking, a man does not become a bishop because he's great at stocks, right? I mean, it's just
Well,
not
right.
in the zone. So,
Yeah.
but actually, what I was going to get to with this, and I'm going to ask you this, and this is maybe a little bit of rapid fire. Um,
Okay.
so you believe that there are certain either industries or companies that would be immoral for a Christian to invest in, right?
Of course.
Okay. Well, you say of course, but there's a lot of folks that don't say that. So I
How
know
could
you,
I how could I look myself in the mirror if I
yep.
invested in OnlyFans? Oh.
Yeah, it's disgusting. But it's like, you know, what I say is, you know, our Lord has told us that we will have to account for every careless word that left our mouths.
Mm.
And I think the
Don't
idea
do that
is,
to me. Don't do
yeah,
that
I
to
know.
me, Daniel.
Well, all I do is say bad words, I think. But, you know, it's here. Look, this is not live. You know, we can edit them out. But in all seriousness, one day I will close my eyes for the last time and I will open them face to face with my God. And he, I believe, will call me to account for every careless dollar that left my wallet. And we see that in
Mm.
multiple parables. And so,
Yeah.
you know, we'll start with the easy ones. Can a Christian of good conscience, and we'll broaden it, we'll make it broad. Can a Christian of good conscience invest in a company that produces abortion drugs?
I would say no.
Okay. Can a Christian of good conscience invest in a company whose health benefits pay for abortion drugs for their employees?
Oh, so like the United Healthcare?
Sure. That's exactly the one I was thinking. That's very good.
Yeah. Um, I would strongly discourage it.
Yeah. So you would say no for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. And there's direct and indirect
Yes.
investing, and that's part of the I personally don't like uh as a rabid anti-communist.
Mhm.
Um I always thought that everybody owning everything is
Mhm.
bad.
Hmm.
And so the massive indexification and
Mm,
pooled, I think is a
huge problem.
problem.
You'd love
Yeah.
the new polity guys. They make that argument, I
Yeah.
think, very articulately. I think that's
I
true.
mean, there's arguments, but the reason you're dealing with there are huge, not just ethical, but
Mhm.
you you end up severing the tie
Mhm.
uh, for several reasons, but in this case, between the investor and what they're investing in, it just
That's
becomes
Aquinas 101. I
yeah,
agree with completely. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's
There's a
related to
relationship.
well, yeah, and it's related to his arguments on usury and so on
Yes.
and so forth. So
Yes.
there has to be a relation. Again, it's relational.
Mhm.
And I think we've created structures because we believe humans are fungible. We believe investments are fungible as well. And that's the root. That's this kind of macro issue
Yep.
I'm speaking of that we can deal with these individual
Mhm.
questions, but we've got this macro structure that is causing these questions
Yes. It's a
in a
huge
lot of
problem.
cases.
It's a huge problem. If you can't get specific with your investments, you cannot get specific with your morality. And so knowing exactly the holdings you own with a
Well,
clear conscience is
so
necessary.
so imagine you went home and you wanted to have marital relations with your wife, but there was just a woman in your bedroom, but she had a sheet over her head.
Mhm. Yeah, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work, does
No.
it?
No,
It
because of the
because
marital
you're
act,
not
that
there's
bond
you that's right.
between two human persons, not anonymous person and
Well, and
person.
you don't even and you can't even guarantee that that's your wife.
Right. That's absolutely true. And so, you know, actually, to make it very simple, Ron, my argument is if you profit from a venture, private public, bond, stock, real estate, doesn't matter. You have moral responsibility. And that moral responsibility falls into two camps. Either the sin action of that venture is so great and so fundamental to the business itself that you must divest. So you just cannot participate at all. That's, I think, one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is you invest in a venture, and there's no pure ventures in the world because we're all fallen and our businesses are fallen and all of that. But if it doesn't rise to the level of disengagement or divestment, you are required to advocate for change in the company you own or you're loaning money to. That could be letter writing, proxy vote control, whatever. But the idea of a true passive investing where you don't divest and you don't advocate, I think is antithetical to what it means to be a Christian in this world incarnated in economics.
Yeah, that's probably true. I've done a lot. I mean, I'm very much a believer in the broad sense, in the priesthood model. So I am a priest. I am a house servant who is trying to guide folks who are less trained in this through the financial temple, so to speak, and show them this is how you do this is how you do this sacrifice. This is how you do this sacrifice. You're not allowed to walk over there.
Right.
That's not, you can't go over there. Okay. Yeah. We're going to wash in the, what's that?
Boundaries. These are appropriate boundaries.
Well, of course, the understand, the law, the Torah had no provision for high-handed sin. There was no sacrifice for high-handed sin. The sins that you had to repent, and then the priest, there was a process you went through that took the status of the high-handed sin down to the status of a trespass. And the that's why you added the trespass offering. And so we don't understand, and I don't want to sound like I'm going to start sounding like Augustine here, but
That's
this
a good
idea,
thing.
yeah. Well, I mean, again, we share this tradition. It's where I get a little sideways sometimes with my Orthodox friends because I start talking about Augustine and they're like, angry God all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
I'm probably the least Augustinian Catholic you're going to meet, but we don't got time to do that today. But I will say we just passed the hour mark, and I want to say, Ron, it's been a real pleasure to talk with you today about theology and finance and some of the philosophy. I mean, we've been all over the place. And I also love the true ecumenism of common engagement and our ability to share what may seem like differences, but I think oftentimes are just different perspectives on the same idea that we agree upon. And I think that's really cool. And one subject that I wanted to talk to you about today, you have a great knowledge and background in geopolitics and the things that are going on on this planet with the terrible thing that's happening with Iran and Ukraine and these types of subjects. And I have a bit of a background in that as well. And I think it'd be really cool to have you back on the show just to do a whole show on geopolitics. I think it'd be great.
Would love it anytime.
Well,
I talk about that kind of stuff a lot. I did an hour and a half earlier today on the ladder of nuclear weapons development and how therefore we knew that Iran didn't have a nuclear weapon. But that's another topic.
I don't think they're going to have one for a while. Let's pray that they don't. But in all seriousness, too, I want to say on behalf of Arimathea and our podcast, Treasures in Heaven, it's been a great pleasure having you, Ron. God bless you and all the work that you do. And we're excited to be co-workers in the vineyard with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course.